State recognized presence of the jury.
Yes.
Does the defense. Okay, members of the jury, I hope you had a nice lunch. Okay, did you heed all of my previous admonitions? Okay. The state's next witness.
Adriana Acedo.
I do. My name is Adriana Acevedo. First name Adriana, last name Acevedo.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed, ma'am?
I'm employed with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been with Orange County?
A little over 5 years.
Back in July of 2008, what was your role with the Orange County Sheriff's Office? What were your assignments?
I was assigned to Sector 2 road patrol on the afternoon shift.
Okay. Would Sector 2 in Orange County include addresses on Hope Spring Drive?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. As a result of your assignment to the Patrol Division in Sector 2, did you respond to a call at 4937 Hope Spring Drive on July 15th of 2008?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you arrive after Corporal Rendon Fletcher?
Yes.
Does the Orange County Sheriff's Office keep a record of the dispatch times of officers?
Yes, they do.
Okay. Have you had an opportunity to review that record?
Yes, ma'am.
Do the records of the Orange County Sheriff, or does your memory allow you to tell us when you arrived at that residence?
Yes, ma'am.
When was that?
I arrived at 9:52
AM or PM?
p.m.
When you arrived, was Corporal Fletcher already in the house?
Yes.
Okay. What action did you take?
I walked towards the front door where Rendon Fletcher was inside the residence. I met with him at the door and asked him for specifics as what was going on inside the residence.
Okay. Once you got a briefing from Corporal Fletcher, did you seek to take written statements from individuals inside the home?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you take written statements, or did you provide statement forms to George Anthony, Cindy Anthony, Lee Anthony, and ultimately Casey Anthony?
Yes, I went to my vehicle and I got blank copies of the statement forms and I brought them inside the residence with me.
All right. After your arrival, did Sergeant Reginald Hosey arrive?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Was Sergeant Hosey directing your activities that evening?
Yes.
Did Sergeant Hosey direct you to escort Casey Anthony to any particular location?
Yes.
Okay. What time did you begin that escort?
The escort began after 2350 hours, which would be 11:53. 11:50.
Now, Miss Anthony got into your vehicle?
Yes.
What type of vehicle was this?
A marked patrol car
Okay, and where did she sit in that vehicle?
in the rear of the marked patrol car.
All right. Was she under arrest?
No, ma'am.
Was she handcuffed?
No, ma'am.
Did you take some step to ensure that she was going with you voluntarily?
Yes.
What was that?
I asked her if she was willing to go with me in my vehicle, and she advised yes.
Okay. Was it your understanding that you were taking her to the last location where she saw her child?
Yes.
Anyone that you're transporting in your vehicle who is not under arrest, Do you take further steps once they are in your vehicle to ensure that they are continuing to be there voluntarily?
Yes.
What steps did you take with Ms. Anthony to ensure that was the case?
To keep verbal communication with her, to ask her if she was fine, how is she doing inside the vehicle, and communication with her, and to let her know that if at any time she didn't want to be in the vehicle, to please advise me of that.
All right. And at any point in time when you're on your way to this location, does she tell you she wants to go back to her residence, she wants to get out of the vehicle, anything of that nature which would indicate that she was not there voluntarily?
No, ma'am.
Where did you go?
To the Sawgrass Apartments.
What is the address of the Sawgrass Apartments?
I know that they're on Conway. As far as for the exact numerical, I have to refer to my report.
Your Honor, may the witness refer to her report to refresh her recollection for the numerical?
She may.
The exact numerical address is 2863 South Conway Road.
How long did it take for you to get from 4937 Hope Spring Drive to 2863 South Conway Road?
Only a few minutes.
Can you tell from the reports of the Orange County Sheriff's Office, or do you recall from your memory what time you would have arrived at the Sawgrass Apartments?
The exact time is notated in the call log, and I'd have to look at that call log.
All right, if I may approach the witness, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as MW, a composite exhibit for identification.
The time of arrival is 5 after the hour, 5 after midnight.
All right, what did you do when you were at the Sawgrass Apartments?
I arrived at the apartments. She advised which apartment exactly it was, and then we returned to the residence.
All right. When you're referring to she, are you speaking of Casey Anthony?
Yes, Casey Anthony.
Did she direct you to a specific location?
She pointed to an apartment and directed us to that building.
All right. When you say us, are you speaking of you and Corporal Rendon Fletcher?
Yes, ma'am.
When you were being directed to this particular location, who was telling you where to drive?
Casey Anthony.
Okay. Did she tell you where to stop?
Yes.
You said she pointed to an apartment. Do you have that apartment number listed in your report, or do you recall from your memory what apartment number she directed you to?
It's listed in the report, and it's apartment number 210.
Did she make any statement as to what happened at apartment number 210?
I don't recall her making any statements.
Okay. Did you ask her if she was certain that that was the location where she had last seen her daughter?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And what did she tell you?
That she was certain that that was the apartment.
You said that you left there and went to another location?
We returned to her residence.
Okay. And do you recall, or do the records of the Orange County Sheriff reflect when you would have returned to Hope Spring Drive?
Yes. The records show that the return time is 25 after the hour, 25 after midnight.
And at that point, what happened to Miss Anthony?
I let her out of the vehicle, and she returned to the residence.
Okay. Thank you. Those are all the questions I have of the deputy, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Please, the court. Good afternoon, Ms. Acedo.
Good afternoon.
When you arrived, the Mrs. Anthony, what was her demeanor like?
She was upset.
And Mr. George Anthony, what was his demeanor like?
It was calm, quiet.
And what about Casey Anthony's demeanor? What was she like?
She was fairly quiet.
Just like Mr. Anthony.
Yes.
Now,
No.
and she was placed in the back cage of your police car?
Yes, sir.
And that's when you drove off and went to the Sawgrass Apartments.
Yes.
And how long were you in the house before you went to Sawgrass?
Almost about 2 hours.
Okay. In that 2 hours, did you see the garage open?
Yes.
Did you see the Pontiac in the garage?
Yes, sir.
And did you see
I believe Deputy, you want the name?
if you recall it?
I believe Deputy Ryan Williams did.
Did you direct the deputies to take written statements from the parties at the residence?
Yes, I did.
Would that have included the written statement of Casey Anthony?
Yes, it would have.
After Ms. Anthony's written statement was obtained, did you have an opportunity to have a conversation with her?
Yes, I did.
How did that take place?
Well, I actually walked and talked with her briefly. One of the things that I wanted to do at that time, because the child issue was into play, is that reassure her that I wasn't there to take her child, or the deputies weren't there to take her child from her. We just wanted to know the location just to make sure she was okay.
Was this conversation that you had with her after information was gathered by your agency that the child was kidnapped?
Not that the child was kidnapped, but I believe just missing, or we didn't know the whereabouts.
Was the conversation after Ms. Anthony had returned from the Sawgrass Apartments with Deputy Acedo?
Yes, it was.
You're aware that they returned from the Sawgrass apartment without the child?
Correct.
Did you receive any information from Ms. Anthony as to where the child could be other than the Sawgrass Apartments?
Yes, I did. She mentioned that she was with a nanny, Zenaida. During our conversation.
Right. When you spoke with Ms. Anthony, did you ask her if she would agree to accompany you on a short walk away from the house?
Yes, I did.
Why was it that you wanted to get away from the house?
Because of everything that was going on, we had multiple deputies on the scene, of course, the other family members that were there. So I just kind of walked away as the supervisor there, the ultimate authority figure at that time. I just wanted to walk her away and just, once again, like I said, reassure her, because previous conversations included the fact that she and her mother, they weren't getting along, or her parents weren't getting along, that her mother just wanted to keep the baby or get the baby from her. So I just want to once again reassure her that, we didn't have any court orders. We didn't have anything saying that we needed to take the baby from her. So I just wanted to make sure that the child was okay.
All right. Did Miss Anthony indicate to you in any way that this was just a domestic dispute between her and her mother as opposed to a kidnapping?
She during the time we were there, she was constantly talking about that that she and her mother were not getting along, and it was more so that she wanted to keep her mom from getting the child from her.
Okay. At that time, did you all have any further success in attempting to locate the child?
No, we didn't.
As a result of that, did you follow Orange County Sheriff's Office procedure and contact a detective?
Yes, I did.
And who did you contact?
Corporal Melich.
At that juncture, would it have been the responsibility of those individuals in the detective unit or bureau to follow up on the information that the patrol officers had received that evening?
Correct.
Thank you. I have no other questions of the witness, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You're out of uniform.
Yes, I am.
You still work for sheriff.
I do.
You're a detective now.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Why are you out of uniform?
I want to wear a suit. Look nice.
For court.
Yes.
Good guy. Now, you are still a sector commander or whatever you call it?
No, I'm not. I'm actually, since we last spoken, I've been promoted to lieutenant, which right now I'm currently assigned to the Uniform Patrol Division as a watch commander.
Am I correct that the county is divided up in grids or sectors with all kinds of different responsibilities?
6 sectors, correct.
Got sheriff on top and then a bunch of
Correct.
other brass and then get down to you guys.
Correct.
And is the reason for that so you become familiar with the area that you're assigned to?
Currently?
Well, when you were in charge of this sector that we've just been talking about.
Well, I was only in charge of a squad, not the particular sector itself, but had responsibilities. My deputies had responsibilities throughout the sector.
So when somebody told you an address of Hope Springs Drive, you had some idea where Hope Springs Drive was?
Back then, I don't recall if I actually knew the actual location.
And back then, you had never heard of the Anthony family, isn't that correct, sir?
Before we received the call?
Right.
No, I didn't.
Never knew or heard anything about Casey Anthony?
No, I didn't.
George or Cindy Anthony?
No, I didn't.
Brother Lee Anthony?
No, I didn't.
They weren't on your radar screen.
No, they weren't.
So when you arrived, how many deputies were already there, sir?
I believe just Corporal Fletcher and Deputy Acedo.
And were they all in uniform?
Yes, they were.
And uniform includes the full utility belt, guns, tasers, whatever?
Correct.
And they were in marked patrol cars?
Yes, they were.
Were you?
Yes, I was.
So when you arrived then at that house on Hope Springs, there's 3 marked patrol cars?
Correct.
Do you know how long the other deputies had been at that site before you arrived, sir?
I want to say somewhere in the realm of 30 to 40 minutes prior to my arrival.
Did you hear the first call that resulted in the dispatch of Brandon Fletcher and or Adriana Acedo?
Correct. I do remember it.
Was the call for a suspected stolen car?
Correct.
Were you advised, in fact, that she had been handcuffed?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to hearsay, facts not evidence.
Overrule, he can answer the question, yes or no.
Repeat the question, please.
Would you read the question back exactly as stated, please, ma'am?
Were you advised of the fact she had been handcuffed?
Yes.
But it was not in your presence.
I
Is
don't
that the bottom line?
remember. I don't remember being handcuffed.
Okay. You directed the drive to Sawgrass Apartments, did you?
Correct.
And were you present when she, that is, Casey Anthony, departed in the back of Adriana Acevedo's marked patrol car?
I was on property, yes.
And she was put in the back, what you all refer to as the cage.
Deputy Acevedo had a cage in the car, yes.
And the cage is where Casey was put.
I believe she was riding in the rear of the vehicle, yes.
Now you, sir, when you approached the property at Whole Spring Drive, first time, right?
Mm-hmm.
First time you ever been there?
Yes.
Was the garage open or closed?
The garage was open.
Was the trunk open or closed?
Open.
And did you go up to the car?
Yes, I did.
And did you smell some form of a foul odor?
Yes, I did.
And having done so, did you report that to crime scene investigators, CSI?
No, because I don't believe I talked to our forensic unit that night.
And not only did you not report to CSI, sir, you did not conduct any inspection in that trunk, did you?
No, I didn't.
You didn't write any reports in this case either, did you?
No, I didn't.
When you decided to separate Casey from the rest of the people, you wanted so you'd be alone to talk with her? Was that the deal?
Yes.
You were in full uniform,
Correct.
just like everybody else.
Correct.
And she went with you. You say about 40 paces or so?
40 yards.
40
yes.
yards? And you talked with her.
Yes.
Did you or any of these officers in your presence at any time on that evening, to your knowledge, advise her of her Miranda warning rights?
I'm not aware of anyone doing that.
Did she have any method or manner, sir, of being able to get out of the cage of Acevedo's patrol car?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to relevance.
Yes, she could have asked Deputy Acevedo that to stop the vehicle, or that she didn't want to go or to exit the vehicle.
Good spot. Other than asking, could she have opened the door herself?
No, those vehicles, you're not allowed to do that.
Can't physically do it, the bottom line.
Correct. From the inside.
Were you present when Miss Anthony was returned from the field trip to Sawgrass Apartments?
Yes, I was.
And did she just say, "See ya, have a good night, I'm going out"?
Who are you talking about?
Casey.
No, she didn't say
But
that.
she was led into her house, wasn't she?
I believe she was led into her house.
By one of your full uniformed armed deputies on the scene.
Correct.
And she was taken inside that house, and she was kept there until Deputy or Detective Yuri Melich arrived. Is that correct?
I believe she was talking with several deputies, yes.
Several deputies in there. How many more were there now? I thought there were just the three of you. More?
Well, the deputies that were originally on scene.
Okay, and were there any more that came?
I don't recall any more coming to the scene.
So while the period of time of getting out of the cage, being led into the house, she was in there with at least 3 deputies waiting for Detective Yuri Melich. Is that correct?
Could have been, all the deputies could have been in the house at one time, yes.
And do you remember how long it was before Deputy Melich showed up?
From my call,
Yes, sir.
I believe, I can't say for sure. I know it was, I want to say it was a couple hours, hour and a half, 2 hours.
So for all that period of time, whether it's an hour and a half to 2 hours or whatever, Casey is in the home, family home, with at least 3 deputies waiting for Detective Melich.
Not necessarily, because the deputies were, they weren't there inside the house all at the same time for every minute that we were waiting on Detective Melich, because they were going back and forth to their cars, getting things out, getting statements.
Some walking around in the house.
Probably out at that time, I was back and forth between phone calls, looking at my computer, checking on other things that were going on.
But all at the address of Hope Spring Drive.
Correct.
None of you left.
Correct.
Nobody else left either, did they?
Not that I can recall.
And you weren't going to let anybody leave either, were you?
I can't say that I wouldn't have.
Now, sir, were you present thereafter when Detective Melich came and interviewed Casey?
I don't know how long I stayed after Detective Melich arrived.
Did he kind of take over the scene? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much once we call the detective, we start letting them do their investigation. Road Patrol's preliminary investigation is pretty much concluded to when they start taking over.
So therefore then, you are not in the chain of custody of any evidence in this case, are you, sir?
No, I'm not.
And other than whatever Casey said to you when you did your walk, you were not involved in any of the statements given by anybody in the case, are you?
Correct.
Only time you ever had anything else to do with the case was to go back when all of these demonstrators who had nothing better in life to do to come and protest at the house. You had something to do with that, right? When you left the scene that night, sir, were you done other than having to come through the deposition process and trial?
Correct.
You had nothing else to do with the case at all?
No, I didn't.
Just a moment, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you. Lieutenant Hosey, on July 15th of 2008, were you advised by Casey Anthony that her child was alive?
Yes.
Were you advised by Casey Anthony that she believed her child to be well?
Yes.
Were you advised by Casey Anthony that the child was with a babysitter that she could not contact at that moment?
Correct.
Were you advised by Casey Anthony that she didn't want her mother to have contact with her child that evening?
Yes.
When you are making assignments to the deputies at that scene, is it important that they gather information by talking to people
Yes.
who are there
Yes.
and taking statements from people who are there?
Yes.
The individuals in the house with these armed deputies would include George Anthony, correct?
Correct.
Cindy Anthony,
Correct.
and Lee Anthony. Do you remember Lee Anthony being there?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Do you remember Lee Anthony leaving and returning?
I don't remember him leaving and returning.
Did you make any effort to stop Lee Anthony if he left, if he wanted to leave?
No.
Did you make any effort to stop George or Cindy Anthony or Casey Anthony if they wanted to leave?
No.
Did any of those individuals, including Casey Anthony, tell you that they wanted to leave or go anywhere else that evening?
No, they didn't.
Did they all appear to be cooperating with your deputies in an effort to locate Kaylee Marie Anthony?
Yes, they were.
When Miss Anthony went in Deputy Acevedo's patrol car, would you have instructed Deputy Acevedo to maintain communication with Miss Anthony to ensure that she was going freely and voluntarily? To what he would have done.
Could you repeat the question?
Do you know if you would have given instruction to Deputy Acevedo to ensure that Casey Anthony was going with her freely and voluntarily?
Yes.
When you said you were there when Miss Anthony returned,
Yes, I was.
okay, was she free to walk about the house under her own power?
Yes, she was.
Did you or did any of the other deputies in your presence tell her she couldn't leave or that she couldn't go anywhere?
I didn't tell her, and I'm not aware of any of the deputies telling her that she couldn't go anywhere.
Okay. When you sought to speak with her briefly away from her family, did she tell you she didn't want to go with you?
No, she didn't.
Was she being cooperative?
Yes.
Was she speaking to you freely as best you could tell?
Yes.
Did you have her in handcuffs at that point?
No, I didn't.
That's all I had. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Greenberg just asked you about these other people here. Was George Anthony all upset or was he calm?
At what time?
Anytime while you were there?
Overall, he was calm, but he voiced the same concerns as Cindy Anthony in reference to Casey's behavior.
But his demeanor and his actions were a calm person.
Yes, he was pretty calm.
And in that process, he advised you he was an ex-cop.
Yes, he did.
And Cindy Anthony, she wasn't calm at all, was she?
She wasn't what?
Calm.
She was upset, tearful, angry. She showed a lot of different emotions that night, but she was also calm at certain points.
Upset, tearful, angry, and some calm.
And calm.
The one, Casey, when you walked and talked with her, she had a flat effect the whole time, didn't she?
Correct.
You know what that means, don't you?
A flat affect?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
Thank you very much.
May the lieutenant be excused? He may. Thank you, Lieutenant.
Thank you.
Your Honor, may we approach on a housekeeping matter?
Yes, ma'am. All right, who's the state's next witness? Yes.
I do. My name is Yuri Melich, Y-U-R-I-M-E-L-I-C-H.
All right, you may proceed, Ms. Drain.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
How are you employed, sir?
I work with the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been employed with Orange County?
Just under 10 years, since October of 2001.
Do you have an assignment with them currently?
I do.
What is that?
I work for the Professional Standards Section, better known as Internal Affairs.
In July of 2008, did you have a different assignment?
I did.
What was that?
I was a detective corporal in the Missing Persons Child Abuse Unit.
Okay. Can you explain for the jurors what the responsibilities of a detective corporal in that unit would entail?
Along with supervisory responsibilities, we had 3 detectives and 4 civilians under our command. We also investigated cases of missing persons and investigated allegations of child abuse.
As of July of 2008, how long had you had that assignment?
I was promoted and transferred there in April of 2008.
Prior to your promotion, what background did you have with the Orange County Sheriff?
For just over 2 years, I worked with the Homicide Division.
What else?
Prior to that, I spent a year working as a detective in Eastside Property Unit,
What is that?
investigating property crimes on the east side of Orange County.
Burglaries, things like that? To
Yes.
people's residences,
That's-
break-ins at houses and things like that?
Yes, that's correct.
Prior to your assignment as a detective, did you work in patrol?
I did.
On July 16th of 2008, did you receive a call from then Sergeant Reginald Hosey regarding the events occurring at 4937 Hope Spring Drive?
I did.
As a result of that call, did you respond to 4937 Hope Spring?
I did.
Do you recall what time you arrived on scene?
Just before 4 o'clock in the morning, between 3:30 and 4 o'clock, 3:51, I believe.
When you arrived there, did you meet with an individual by the name of Casey Anthony?
I did.
Did you become aware that she had given any sort of written statement in regards to the events that the patrol officers were investigating?
Yes.
If I may approach the witness, Your Honor. I'm going to show you what's been marked as KI for identification.
Thank you.
Take a look at that item and tell me if you recognize it.
I do.
Were you provided with that upon your arrival that morning
Yes.
from the patrol deputies who were there?
Yes.
Did you show it to Casey Anthony?
I believe I did because I ended up referring to it in a later interview with her, so yes.
All right. After showing it to her, did you ask her if this was in fact her statement?
Yes, I did.
Did you ask her if she wrote it herself?
I did.
Okay. And did she adopt that statement as being one that she had written out?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to introduce KI for identification into evidence.
What says the defense?
We would object as to the proper predicate. This detective does not know the circumstances surrounding how that statement was taken. It's not the
Let me see
officer
the
who took the statement.
Response from the state of Florida?
Your Honor, the witness has indicated that these statements were adopted in their entirety by Ms. Anthony, that he had shown her the statement, asked her if she wrote it, and if it was in fact her statement. They are adoptive admissions.
Any additional objection besides not a proper predicate? Okay, based upon that objection will be overruled. It'll be received in evidence as. Okay, mark it, Madam Clerk, and then we can hand it back to the witness.
I'm sorry, that's number 60? I wanted to set up the document camera. Apparently there's a slight technical difficulty with trying to display it on the monitor. I apologize.
Yes, ma'am.
Detective Melich, you see the document in front of you?
I do.
Can you read to the jury Miss Anthony's statement?
On Monday, June 9th, 2008, between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., I, Casey Anthony, took my daughter, Kaylee Marie Anthony, to her nanny's apartment. Kaylee will be 3 years old on August 9, 2008. She was born on August 9, 2005. Kaylee is about 3 feet tall, white female, with shoulder-length light brown hair. She has dark hazel eyes, parentheses, brown/green, close parentheses, and a small birthmark on her left shoulder. On the day of her disappearance, Kaylee was wearing a pink shirt with jean shorts, white sneakers, and her hair was pulled back in a ponytail. On Monday, June 9, 2008, between 9 a.m. and 1 p.m., I took Kaylee to the Sawgrass Apartments, located on Conway Road. Kaylee's nanny, Zenaida Fernandez-Gonzalez, has watched her for the past year and a half to 2 years. Zenaida is 25 years old and is from New York. She is roughly 5 foot 7 inches tall, 140 pounds. She has dark brown curly hair and brown eyes. Zenaida's birthday is in September. I met Zenaida through a mutual friend, Jeffrey Michael Hopkins. She has watched his son Zachary Hopkins for about 6 months to a year. I met Zenaida in 2004 around Christmas. On the date listed above, June 9, 2008, after dropping Kaylee off at Zenaida's apartment, I proceeded to head to my place of employment, Universal Studios Orlando. I have worked at Universal for over 4 years, since June of 2004. I left work around 5 p.m. and went back to the apartment to pick up my daughter. However, after reaching the apartment, I realized that neither Zenaida, Kaylee, or either of her 2 roommates were home. I have briefly met Raquel Farrell and Jennifer Rosa on various occasions. After calling Zenaida to see where she and Kaylee were and when they were coming home, I waited outside of the apartment. I had called Zenaida earlier that morning, prior to bringing Kaylee over for the afternoon. When I called her that afternoon, her phone was no longer in service. 2 hours passed, and around 7 p.m., I left the apartment and headed to familiar places that Zenaida would go with Kaylee. One of Kaylee's favorite places is J. Blanchard Park. I spent the rest of that evening pacing and worrying at one of the few places I felt, quote, at home, unquote, my boyfriend Anthony Lazzaro's apartment. For the past 4 weeks, since Kaylee's disappearance, I have stayed at Anthony's apartment in Sutton Place. I have spent every day since Monday, June 9, 2008, looking for my daughter. I have lied and stolen from my friends and family to do whatever I could by any means to find my daughter. I avoided calling the police or even notifying my own family out of fear. I have been, and still am, afraid of what has or may happen to Kaylee. I have not had any contact with Zenaida since Thursday, June 12, 2008. I received a quick call from Zenaida. Not once have I been able to ask her for my daughter or gain any information on where I can find her. Every day I have gone to malls, parks, any place I could remember Zenaida taking Kaylee. I have gone out and tried to find any information about Kaylee or Zenaida, whether by going to a popular bar or restaurant. I have contacted Jeff Hopkins on several occasions to see if he had heard from or seen Zenaida. Jeff currently lives in Jacksonville, Florida. On Tuesday, July 15, 2008, around 12 p.m., I received a phone call from my daughter, Kaylee. Today was the first day I have heard her voice in over 4 weeks. I'm afraid of what Kaylee is going through. After 31 days, I know that the only thing that matters is getting my daughter back. With many and all attempts to contact Zenaida, and within the one short conversation on June 12, 2008, I was never able to check on the status or well-being of my daughter. Zenaida never made an attempt to explain why Kaylee is no longer in Orlando, or if she is ever going to bring her home.
Where did you review that statement with Miss Anthony?
If I recall correctly, it was in a spare bedroom they had at the Anthony home.
Okay. When you arrived at the Anthony home, did you ask Ms. Anthony if she would speak to you about the statement that she had written prior to your arrival?
If you're referring to Casey Anthony, yes.
Miss Anthony?
Yes.
Yes, Casey Anthony. All right. And did she agree to speak with you?
Yes.
Did you stay in what you referred to as the spare bedroom and speak with her further?
Yes.
Okay. At that point, did you place her on tape?
Yes.
Audio tape. Okay. Have you had the opportunity to listen to that audio tape?
Yes.
Does the audio fairly and accurately reflect the conversation that you had with Casey Anthony?
Yes.
MU for identification into evidence, MV being a transfer.
What says the defense?
Renew all previous motions and objections.
Noting previous motions and objections, objections will be overruled and it will be received in evidence.
Detective Melich, have you had the opportunity to review the transcript that was generated from the tape?
Yes.
And have you determined that the transcript is an accurate version of what also appears on tape?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I would seek to publish 61 in evidence to the jury.
Okay, you may publish.
July 16, 2008. The time right now is 04:11 hours. I'm Detective Melich with the Orange County Sheriff's Office, present here at 4937 Hope Spring Drive. I reference Orange County case number 08-069208. I am with Casey Anthony, is that correct?
Yes.
And Casey, would you please state your birthday for me?
03/19/1986.
Okay. Casey, you understand this is being recorded?
Yes.
You have any objection to that?
No.
All right. Casey, I got called here by Sergeant Reggie Hosey with the Orange County Sheriff's Office in reference to a missing child. We sat here and talked for a short moment before we went on tape because I wanted to make sure that your sworn statement, which I'm looking at, was accurate. I'm looking at 4 pages of a sworn statement. On the bottom appears to be your signature. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you're saying that everything contained in these statements are true and accurate?
Yes.
Also, before I turned on the recorder, I gave you a chance because I wanted to explain what happens if you make a false report or if there's something about this incident that you're not telling us the truth of.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to make sure I made it perfectly clear that, if you want to go ahead and rescind this statement, and if you want to tell me a different story about what happened,
Mm-hmm.
if you're trying to fabricate a story to kind of make something look a little bit better,
Mm-hmm.
now is your time to tell me. Are you telling me that this is the story you want to stick with?
That's the truth. It's the story I'm going to stick with. Yes.
Okay. In your own words, let's go back. Your daughter's name is Kaylee, Caylee.
Yes.
Marie Anthony. She was born August 9th.
2005.
Okay. And according to your statement back on August 9th, back on June 9th, 2008, you took Casey to a babysitter's house.
Yes.
And who was this babysitter?
Her name is Zenaida Fernandez Gonzalez.
Do you know how to spell the first name?
Zenaida.
And where was Zenaida's? Where did you drop your child off?
The Sawgrass Apartments on Conway, Michigan.
Do you remember the address?
I don't remember the address.
Do you remember an apartment number?
210.
Okay.
It's on the second floor.
If you were to pull into the Sawgrass Apartments, would the building be the one closest to the road, furthest back, halfway?
As soon as you go straight, you go over one speed bump, and it's the first one on the right-hand side.
Okay. Is there a pool next to it, or is there anything about the apartment that stands out?
There's a welcome sign. It's, I guess there's a little shed close to the building, maybe about 10 yards away.
Okay. How long had you known Zenaida?
Almost 4 years. It'll be 4 years Christmas this year.
And where did you meet her? Who did you meet her through?
A mutual friend, his name is Jeffrey Michael Hopkins. I met him at Nickelodeon at Universal, and I met her through him. She was his son's nanny at the time.
Does Jeffrey still work at Universal?
No, he does not.
How long has it been since he left?
About 9-10 months, give or take.
Did he move back to Jacksonville?
He moved up to North Carolina for a short time and moved down to Jacksonville within the last 3 months.
When was the last time you spoke with him?
About a week and a half ago.
Okay. Do you know a telephone number for him?
I can find a number for him. I don't know a number offhand. No, I do not.
You mentioned something before we went on tape about your cell phones.
Yes. I have 2 phones. I just received a new phone through work, through Universal. The phone won't keep charged, so I use my old phone that I actually had gotten, again, through Universal for work.
Okay. Did you lose a phone?
Yes.
Was it your personal phone?
It was my personal phone, but I also use it for business.
Okay. What's the number for the phone that you lost?
407-619-9286. It's
Did
the
you
same
keep
number.
that same number?
Yes, it's
You
still
just
the
lost
same
the
number.
phone.
I just lost the phone.
And in that phone, you're saying was a SIM card, and the SIM card had the contact
Actually,
information?
the SIM card is in my Nokia phone, but I know there's numbers saved to the cell phone itself. So if we get the actual phone, I know I have one other number for Zenaida, and probably a number for Jeff besides work numbers, and
But they're not in your SIM card?
they're not saved on the SIM card. They're saved on the phone. I've been trying to figure out on that new phone how to save numbers from the phone to the SIM card and switch them back and forth. So that way I have everything all in one piece.
Okay, so the phone where you had the number saved was lost.
Yes, I filed an incident report.
But how did you end up keeping the SIM card?
I had taken it out. I know I left the phone on my desk at work after I'd switched the SIM card back to my old phone, because this was the phone that actually would keep charge. And I want to be able to have a working phone instead of having a phone that would only stay charged for about a half hour and then it would die and I can't make any more calls. It's, for me, not
So
practical.
after you switched the SIM card was when the phone went.
I left
That's
it. I know I left it on my desk, and I hadn't been at work for at least 3 or 4 days.
And you said you made the report to Universal? Or
Yes, with security.
When
9
was
days
that?
ago.
9 days ago?
Yes,
Okay. So you met Zenaida through Jeffrey Hopkins,
I did.
and his
Yes.
son Zach Hopkins, I guess. Zenaida used to watch over Zach?
Yes,
And you say you've known Zenaida for about 4 years?
almost 4 years.
So
Yes.
you knew her before you had your child?
Well, I met her just before I was actually pregnant at the time. So,
And when did she start watching over your child?
it's been within the last 1.5 to 2 years that she started watching Kaylee. I had another friend watch Kaylee that I've known since middle school. When she went back to school, I was looking for a new nanny. Jeff offered to have Zenaida watch both kids. She agreed, and it kind of went from there.
Before Zenaida started watching over your child, who was the nanny?
Her name was Lauren Gibbs, Gibbs.
And when did Lauren stop watching your child?
Maybe April of 2006.
Okay. And right in April 2006, roughly, is when Zenaida started watching
Yes.
over? How would you normally drop off, or how would you normally do the exchange with your child and Zenaida? Would you drop the child off? Would you meet you somewhere?
I would usually drop her off for
Yes.
a few months. We would go over to Jeff's house. He lived over in Avalon Park. That was a couple years ago, almost a couple years ago,
And you would go to Jeff's house, why?
to drop off Kaylee. That's where Zenaida would go to watch both of the kids.
Okay.
It was in a nice centralized area. He had a decent sized house. It was good room for the two of them. Then I started bringing Kaylee over to Zenaida's apartment.
How long were you using, or were you going to Zenaida's apartment? When did you start taking Kaylee?
I guess maybe the end of 2006, beginning of 2007.
So since the end of 2006, beginning of 2007, you started taking Kaylee to Zenaida's house on Sawgrass.
She had an apartment on, I guess it's considered Glenwood, but it's off of Bumby and Robinson, close to downtown. She lived there for quite a few months and moved over to Sawgrass just recently this year.
The house on Bumby, do you remember the address or remember where it's at?
I know it's off of Glenwood. I don't remember the apartment number offhand. No, I do not.
And how long would you say you dropped the child off there? From the beginning of, end of 06, beginning of 07 to?
Maybe about 6-7 months, so maybe the middle of 2007.
So she moved into Sawgrass about the middle of 07?
She's been at that apartment in Sawgrass for about the last 3 or 4 months. She lived with her mom for a little bit.
Where does her mom live?
She lived off of Michigan.
Do you know where the house is?
It's not a very well marked neighborhood. It crosses just over Conway. It's one of the big stretches of neighborhoods.
Had you dropped the child off there before?
Yes.
If you had to find the place, would you be able to find it?
Most likely, yes. I think I'd remember the house.
Okay, so she was living off of Glenwood, then moved into her mom's house somewhere off of Michigan, and then moved into
over to
Sawgrass.
Sawgrass.
So Sawgrass 3 or 4 months ago, off of Glenwood until mid 07, in mom's house.
Her mom wasn't living there at the time. Her mom had gotten another place with her sister, but she was staying over at the house and moved in with the 2 girls that are referenced in the pages.
She was living with these 2 girls at Sawgrass?
Yes.
Okay. Go back to your statement. You dropped off Kaylee on June 9th, and walk me through. You dropped her off to go to work? Okay. Get off of work and go from there.
I got off of work, left Universal, driving back to pick up Kaylee like a normal day, and I show up to the apartment, knock on the door, nobody answers. So I call Zenaida's cell phone, and it's out of service. It says that the phone is no longer in service. Excuse me. So I sit down on the steps and wait for a little bit to see if maybe it was just a fluke, if something happened. And time passed. I didn't hear from anyone. No one showed up to the house. So I went over to J. Blanchard Park and checked a couple other places where maybe possibly they would have gone. A couple stores, just regular places that I know Zenaida shops at, and she's taken Kaylee before. And after about 7 o'clock, when I still hadn't heard anything, I was getting pretty upset, pretty frantic, and I went to a neutral place. I didn't really want to come home. I wasn't sure what I'd say about not knowing where Kaylee was. Still hoping that I would get a call or, find out that Kaylee was coming back so that I could go get her. And I ended up going to my boyfriend Anthony's house, who lives in Sutton Place.
Did you talk to Anthony about what happened with Kaylee?
No, I did not.
Had Anthony ever seen Kaylee before?
Yes, he had.
Had you talked to anyone about Kaylee, about your incident with Kaylee? Or the fact
Outside
that
of
she's missing?
A couple people, a couple mutual friends.
Who did you talk to about it?
I talked to Jeffrey Hopkins. I also attempted to contact Zenaida's mother and never received a call back from her.
Do you know Zenaida's mother's name?
Wow, man. I think it's Gloria.
Do you know a telephone number for Zenaida's mom?
I do not know.
Do you have any of these numbers programmed into your SIM card that you kept into your other phone?
No, I do not.
How long did you have this old phone?
I've had the Nokia for almost a full year.
Okay. So after a full year of dealing with Zenaida and having her babysit, and you don't
Switching
remember...
numbers back and forth. Zenaida's number has changed a couple different times. She switched services between having Sprint and having AT&T or Singular.
What about Jeffrey? You've known him for at least 4 years.
His number's changed a couple different times from when he moved from Orlando up to North Carolina and back down to Jacksonville. I know I do have a current number for him.
How would you get that number?
If we can find that other phone, or I might have it online, I may be able to access it off the internet.
Okay. Who else did you talk to about this besides Jeffrey? You said you tried to call Zenaida's mom. You talked to Jeffrey. Who else did you talk to?
I talked to Juliette Lewis. She's one of my coworkers at Universal.
She works. You still work at Universal?
Yes,
What do you do at Universal?
I'm an event coordinator.
Okay. What is Juliet? What position is she? Where she work?
She's also an event coordinator. We work in the same department.
You have a number for Juliet?
Ooh, offhand, I can't think of one.
Is she in your SIM card?
No, she's not. Some of the more recent numbers, her number just changed because she just moved back up north. She, within the last 2 months, has finished moving up to New York. She's subleasing her apartment.
So Juliet doesn't work at Universal anymore?
No, she does not.
When did she leave Universal?
About 2 months ago.
Who else did you talk to about it?
It's been within that small group. I've tried to find out just information from people going out to different places like Fusion Ultra Lounge and a couple bars that I know Zenaida had gone to downtown before to see if, just kind of random talk, if anybody had heard about my nanny or talked to her lately.
Did you tell anyone specifically that Zenaida took your child?
No. The only two people that I specifically told were Jeff and Juliet.
And you don't have a number for Juliet?
Not offhand, no. I do not.
It's not on your phone? It might be online?
It's definitely online. I know it's on one of our old worksheets. Her old number, which could still be active. I'm not sure if it is, but I know she does have a new number, which I just programmed into that other phone.
When was the last time you talked to Juliet?
About 3 weeks ago, shortly after this happened.
So you talked to her after she left?
Mm-hmm.
What's the reason, I asked you this before and I'll ask you just for the record, what's the reason you didn't call the police before? Since right now we're here because your grandparents, or your parents asked you about the child and they were concerned, didn't get an answer as to where the child was, they called the sheriff's office.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't you call prior to today?
I think part of me was naive enough to think that I could handle this myself, which obviously I couldn't. And I was scared that something would happen to her if I did notify the authorities or got the media involved or my parents, which I know would have done the same thing. Just the fear of the unknown, fear of the potential of Kaylee getting hurt, of not seeing my daughter again.
I asked you this at the onset and I asked you before we went on tape, and I'll ask you again just to make sure we're clear. Is there anything about this story that you're telling me that is untrue? Or is there anything that you want to change or divert from what you've already told me?
No, sir.
Did you cause any injury to your child, Kaylee?
No, sir.
Did you hurt Kaylee or leave her somewhere and you're worried that if we find that out that people are going to look at you the wrong way?
No, sir.
And you're telling me that Zenaida took your child without your permission and hasn't returned her?
The last person that I've seen with my daughter, yes.
Where did Zenaida, does she have another job besides watching children?
She has the seasonal ID for Universal. However, the only job that I know that she's had for the last few years, she's been a nanny.
So seasonal employee at Universal?
Mm-hmm.
When was the last time she worked at Universal, do you know?
I have no idea.
Does Kaylee take any medications? Does she suffer from any conditions, any mental conditions that we need to know?
Not at all.
It was brought up before about taking some money from some people, and I want to make sure I get it on tape. Do you have any problems with drugs or narcotics, either prescription narcotics or drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, meth, anything like that?
Nothing like that.
Have you ever been committed for thoughts of suicide? Have you ever been on the lakeside, anything like that?
No.
Is there any underlying cause to why Zenaida would have taken your child?
No. Nothing that...
She ever make any statements to you about...
Only how much she loves Kaylee and how great of a kid she is.
And have you talked, and when you talked to Jeffrey afterwards, I'm assuming that Jeffrey's child is still with him?
His child is still with him.
Okay. You said Zenaida had family up in New England, up in New York or something?
Yes, she has family down south. Her mother, her sister, her brother's in New York. She's originally from New York.
And where's down south?
Miami area.
Where's she originally from?
New York.
She born and raised in New York? She have family outside of the country, or?
I don't know. As far as I know, she pretty much grew up there, moved down here, went to the University of Florida.
Is she Puerto Rican? Is she Dominican? Is she white?
She's mixed. She's black and Puerto Rican.
And you don't know what her birthday is, or you don't know what her birthday is?
It's in September. That's all I can remember at the moment.
If when we finish this, would you be willing to drive with me to show me where her mom lives and the apartment that you used to drop her off at?
Yes.
Okay. Is there anything I haven't asked you about, Kaylee or Zenaida, or just this incident in particular that you feel is important that you wanted to tell me about before I turn this off?
I mean, Kaylee has very distinctive features, even if her hair was cut or changed. She has dark hazel eyes, they're brown and green. She has a birthmark on her left shoulder.
What kind of birthmark?
It's just like a small line. It almost looks like a small little beauty mark.
Anything else?
I just want my daughter back.
Okay. Did you raise your right hand for me?
Yes.
Do you swear and affirm everything you just told me is the truth?
Yes.
Detective Melich, this statement was taken at 4:11 a.m. and lasted about 20 minutes. Did you head out immediately after taking the statement to go look in those places that you asked Ms. Anthony about?
Yes.
Okay. Where did you go?
The first location we went to, later I would find out, turned out to be 301 North Hillside. That's the location she mentioned that was near the intersection of Bumby and Robinson, or off of Glenwood.
Did you get out of the vehicle at that location at 301 North Hillside?
No, we drove by the building, and I asked her if she could point out to me the apartment or windows that belonged to Zenaida or her family. And she pointed out two windows on the side of the building facing Robinson. And she indicated the two windows, one above and one below, both belonged to the same apartment, and that Zenaida and her family had lived there at one point.
Now, you had mentioned that this address at 301 North Hillside was off Glenwood and Bumby. Is that what you had testified to?
At Glenwood and Robinson, because I believe Bumby runs parallel to Glenwood, at 301 North Hillside.
All right. During the course of the investigation into the disappearance of Kaylee Anthony, did you come to find out that there are individuals who Ms. Anthony knew that lived on Glenwood?
Yes.
Who would that be?
Ricardo Morales, and at one point in time, Amy Huizenga, lived at 232 Glenwood, which is directly across from where this building is.
During the drive that morning where she was showing you these locations, did she mention that friends of hers lived directly across the street?
She did not.
Did she mention that she had spent time since her daughter had been missing at the location on Glenwood?
She did not.
Aside from the address on Hillside, did you go to any other location?
We went from there to the Sawgrass Apartments.
What happened at the Sawgrass Apartments?
I asked her to direct me into the Sawgrass Apartments and point out the apartment that she claimed to have dropped Kaylee off on June 9th.
And where were you directed?
I was directed to the first apartment building inside the complex on the right, apartment 210.
Did either of you get out of the car at that point?
I did not, no, neither one.
Okay. Aside from directing you to or pointing out apartment 210, did she make any other statement at that point in the morning about what happened at apartment 210?
I don't recall, no.
Was that the last location that you visited?
No.
Where else did you go?
Almost catty corner from the Sawgrass Apartments are, just forgot the name, the apartments at Conway. There's an intersection right there at Conway and Michigan. And I believe it's the apartments at Conway. If I'm mistaken, please correct me. But it's several single-story townhomes you have several homes that are attached in one building, but each individually owned.
And what was it that you were supposed to have been doing there at this address?
She claims this is one of the locations that Zenaida had lived and that she had dropped off Kaylee several times in the past. So I asked her to direct me to the apartment or the townhome, for lack of a better word, that she had dropped the child off at. And we drove through the entire complex at least once, and she wasn't quite sure which apartment it was, but said it was in the generic or a general area.
Okay. Did you go anywhere else?
No, that's the only location we actually got out of the car, though, because it was starting to get light out, so people were starting to get up to go to work.
All right. Once you all got out of the car, what occurred?
I asked Casey well, let me preface this. We had a marked patrol car also following us with a uniform in case I were to get out of the car.
Overruled.
You can continue.
In case I were to get out of the car and knock on the door, I wanted uniform presence, so there was another marked car with us. I had asked Casey to sit in the car. I rolled the passenger window down. I told her I would knock on the doors of the area. There are several apartments in that area that she indicated. And if she noticed anyone that looked familiar to her, to indicate it to me, and then we would go from there.
All right. Miss Anthony?
Yes.
And did Miss Anthony tell you that any of those apartments or people in those apartments looked familiar to her?
No.
Were you directed anywhere else by Miss Anthony?
No.
After all of this process is completed, about what time it is it? Did you say that it was starting to get light?
I believe we were at the crossings at Conway, the Conway apartments, about just after 6 in the morning.
Once that process was completed, where did you go with Miss Anthony?
I drove her home.
Did either one of you have her cell phone?
No. I don't recall if she had it. I didn't have it.
When you dropped her at home, did you just let her out of the car and she went into the house? What happened?
Yeah, pretty much it.
Did you indicate to her that you would continue to investigate some of the information that she had provided to you?
We had small talk as I dropped her off. Obviously, I said we're going to look to try and see if we can find Kaylee. I can't remember specifically what I told her, but in the general sense, yes.
Okay. Did you leave at that point and begin an investigation into some of the information that she had provided to you?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this point, I have no other questions of the witness.
Cross-examination?
Good afternoon, Detective Melich.
Good afternoon, sir.
Do you ever go by any other names other than Yuri Melich?
Sustain.
You ever go by the name of Dick Tracy Orlando?
Sustain. Next question.
Judge, may we approach?
No, sir.
I'd like to be able to show the relevance of this line of
Okay,
questioning.
you can approach. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to ask that you step outside. We will probably take at least 10 minutes to take care of this brief legal matter outside of your presence. I'm going to ask you not to discuss this case among yourselves, and please abide by all of my other previous admonitions. Thank you. Okay, do you have copies of those for us, Mr. Baez?
Submitted a copy to Ms. Jane Burdick. I can make a quick copy.
I do not believe that these were provided in discovery. Mr. Baez says they were. I've not received very many documents or discs from him, and I have been careful to itemize those that I have received, including one that I actually filed. Nevertheless, if he can provide copies at this time, I'd be willing to take a look at them at the same time as the court.
3 minutes. I can make a quick copy.
Okay, why don't you get some copies, and we'll stand at ease, and the detective can stand down. You can step outside, detective, while we take care of this. Okay, let's go back on the record. Okay, Mr. Baez, you may proceed to tell me why you think this is admissible
Judge, I think that once a witness takes a stand, their credibility is an issue, as well as any possible bias that they may have. These blogs are clear evidence of a detective who is engaging in some sort of self-promotion and discussing this specific case. I think that it clearly goes to this witness's bias and credibility. I don't.
I have these, and I've quickly looked at each one of them. When you say it goes to his credibility / bias, specifically, what are you talking about?
Just the actual engagement of this conduct is that of self-promotion and should go to his bias.
Well, the reason I asked that question, Florida Statute 90.608 is very specific as to the methods of impeachment. And unless you can specifically, and that's why I'm asking, I have these, point something out, this is in sort of in line with you saying he's unprofessional.
Among other things, Judge, yes.
Okay.
I
The
can
problem with saying he's unprofessional, there's a case called Rose versus State, which is found at 472 Southern 2nd, 1155, a 1985 decision of the Florida Supreme Court. I believe this was authored by then Justice Atkins, and it had note 3, and this case was presided over by my good friend Judge Susan Schaefer over in Pinellas County, first-degree murder, and Judge Schaefer imposed a death sentence in this particular case, which was affirmed. And appellate, as an error, contended that the trial court violated his rights to confrontation by restricting cross-examination of the detective on a matter affecting his credibility, and the court indicated that it disagreed. And it basically wanted to bring out his level of professionalism of the detective for the purposes of determining his credibility. And it goes on to talk about 90.608, and they concluded that we find that the appellate's attack on the detective's professionalism was not a proper method of attacking credibility under 90.608. So specifically in these blogs that you have provided me, is there any statement in here that you contend that would affect his bias? So I can specifically look at it, because the broad category of professionalism does not fall within the realm of 90.608 as a valid form of impeachment. Thus, we need to look specifically at your blogs to ascertain whether there is something that goes specifically to credibility in terms of bias or any of the other things dealing with 90.608 or some things I believe in 806. So if you can reference me and so the state can follow along the blog, and I guess these things have dates on them that you would that I can look at to make a determination whether or not it falls in the 90.608?
Yes, Judge. I'll give you an example of why I think this might tend to show this detective's bias. On September 29, 2008 at 2:50 p.m.
Okay, September
29th, 2008.
Just a second.
Yes. 2:50 p.m.
Okay, September
29th.
Okay, the dates I have.
It would be, just to give you, to show you what the date is, it would be above the avatar of Dick Tracy on the top left-hand corner of the inside.
September 29th?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just a second. I have September 26th, September 27th.
They might be out of order because of the way they came out of the copy.
Okay, let me wade through them then. Just give me a second.
Sure.
I don't have one with a September 29th date. If you would take the one that you have and highlight the portion of that, read it into the record, and then hand it to me, or
Yeah, sure.
or you can put it on the overhead and then we all can see it.
Sure, that might work.
Set that overhead up, please.
Yes, I know. We're making extra copies right now. Unfortunately, I was rushing it. Judge, our position is this. On September 29, 2008 at 2:50 p.m., this detective made the following post. A true missing person investigation is akin to a murder investigation without a body. It's the defense's position and theory of the case that this was an accident. This is a detective currently investigating a missing persons case, but yet he considers it akin to a murder investigation without a body, as opposed to possibly considering the fact that it might be an accident. That specifically goes to the bias that we will be cross-examining this officer on multiple levels, that when faced with information that this was a possible accident, he instead took it in the direction of a murder investigation. Naturally, I think it will be...
What information, Mr. Baez, of record evidence that would be introduced that shows this was an accident?
The fact that Mrs. Anthony had informed him within 24 hours of him being involved in the case that they had accidentally, or that she had noticed that the ladder was left up on the pool. There are also multiple statements from both George and Cindy Anthony where they have clearly advised this officer that, in their opinion, this could have been an accident that was covered up, and that accident would have centered around the pool of this case. This officer did absolutely nothing with this information, did not inspect the pool, did not do anything, or did not even question Miss Anthony when he had the opportunity to.
What evidence, Mr. Baez, would one glean from inspecting a pool?
Well, if you never look, you'll never know.
Yeah, but let's say you look. What would you see to determine whether someone drowned?
Well,
if a body's not found in a pool, how do you determine if it was drowned in that particular pool?
There could be spatters of blood around the pool. There could be any number of there could be actual hairs, other trace evidence that could have been found. Not necessarily indicating the cause of death, but certainly, as the state will want to later on argue, that it's post-mortem banding on certain hairs. There's any number of things that one could glean from that type of information, or by investigating. And here's the point. You don't look, you'll never know. And in this situation, they looked at a car and they were clever enough to come up with something new, like air tests. Who knows? Who's to say that they couldn't find something just a bit more clever when it came to surrounding around the pool? But if you don't look, you don't investigate, you're never going to know. It's as if they had parked the car and pushed it aside and did nothing with it. And that's the situation with the pool.
Okay. Mr. Ashton?
To answer the court's question, I believe, was what record evidence is there that the victim drowned? The answer is none. In this trial, at this stage, there is absolutely zero, because with all due respect to counsel, what counsel says isn't evidence of anything. So at this point, the issue is this comment, does it show bias? According to Professor Earhart at Section 608.5, one of Ms. Cheney's favorite authors, he indicates that the underlying, and this is at page 555 of the 2010 edition, he points out the underlying bias, prejudice, or interest must be one that is relevant to the witnesses or parties in the case being litigated. Evidence relating to bias or prejudice is admissible when it's probative of the credibility of the witness. Conversely, evidence of bias that is not probative of credibility should not be admitted. This comment has absolutely nothing to do with showing a bias toward a witness or a party in this case. It shows nothing. And I would submit that it is inadmissible for that reason. Now, with all due respect to counsel's other comments, I believe that the evidence thus far has not demonstrated that Detective Melich was informed by Mrs. Anthony or within 24 hours of something about a ladder. She didn't testify to that. She testified to talking to some reporter at some point about it, but not Detective Melich. And so I think counsel would have to prove that first, obviously, before he asserts that position. While there may have been, we don't have any record evidence now of any comments by anybody that this might have been a drowning, but obviously, somebody's speculations are not relevant. The question is, do these blogs show that he has a bias against the defendant or a bias against a witness in this case? And they clearly don't come even close to that. And we would suggest that his participation in this while he was home recuperating from breaking his leg is not relevant of anything. And it's not impeachment.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Baez, as far as this particular item?
No, sir.
Okay.
Other than I just disagree with the assertions made by counsel, but I'll leave it at that.
Okay. The objection as to the use of that particular document will be sustained. You can make a copy of it and add it to the record for appellate purposes if we get that far. But that particular statement does not go to any particular bias or interest in this particular case. I would take that in consideration, but I think there's a case called Minton versus State that, if I remember the case correctly, that talks about a threshold that must be shown. But let me take a look at it, and we can always do that.
That was objected to was
Dick Tracy.
By the name Dick Tracy, and since we had delved further into what he wanted to do with this information.
Well, Mr. Baez will correct me if I'm wrong. He was just trying to figure out that was he going to own up to this name Dick Tracy for the purposes of introducing the blog.
I will not be inquiring further about
any of these, while we're here and the jury is out, or any of these other blog materials you will be attempting to utilize?
No, sir.
Okay. You also brought up something about a reprimand that you brought up at the bench. Do you? Okay. So we won't have the jury going back out like a Pop-Tart again. Let's take care of that now.
I'm sorry, Judge, I didn't hear you clear.
You had mentioned about the possibility of questioning him about a reprimand. You did not fully go into that. Rather than to run back and forth, do you intend to pursue that line of questioning, which I think the state will object, so we can go ahead and deal with that now?
Well, I wanted to inquire into his supervisor reprimanding him for actually blogging, and however, I don't know if the court's not going to allow me to go into the fact that he blogged. I can't necessarily say why he was reprimanded. Excuse me.
If the only blog that you were attempting to introduce was the one that you've shown, which the court has ruled on, then there's no need to do it. But I don't know if you are attempting to utilize this. I don't know what he was reprimanded for. You're saying he was reprimanded for these blogs?
Correct. It is a activity that I think would be frowned upon for any detective to be going on the World Wide Web and making posts in the middle of an investigation just for the exposure.
But in quickly looking at these posts, which particular posts, other than the one that you just showed us, reference this case?
Well, I think most of them do. Second, if I can point out which ones.
Because there's one that I'm looking at from September 22nd, 2008. Someone says to him, "We aren't here to question him about the case, thanks. This thread is for well wishes and support only. I hope we can all respect that he cannot discuss the case. We want him to feel welcome to come here and relax while he's recovering from his accident. Corporal Melich has enough to deal with from where he sits right now, like reaching the remote if it falls to the floor." And then the next one is, I guess this is Corporal Melich. "Thanks seriously. Besides, I can't officially talk about the case outside of work anyhow, nor can I put an end to theories and conclusions people come up with, whether good or bad. Basically, this is as public as one can get, so I have to watch what I say so doesn't it affect either me or the case. As to the remote, I have the dogs trained to retrieve it. Shame the Dane drew so much. Ick."
Yes, Judge. There are. I'm not indicating or implicating in any way that he was giving up confidential information on the World Wide Web, but there are clear points where he references being involved in the case, what it's like, Kaylee Anthony.
There's one from the September the 20th, 2008, 11:41 a.m., where he referenced, "Also, thank you for keeping Kelly on the forefront. We all are working for her. She's so much more than one person or one agency now. I can only hope we find her soon so these many thousands of people who have been enveloped by this case can find some closure. Then he goes on to talk about his broken leg.
Yes, I would agree. Generally, most of these are general in nature, but as Your Honor pointed out, he does mention Kaylee's name there. The point is, he shouldn't be doing this. Not only is that my position, that's the position of the Orange County Sheriff's Office.
He shouldn't be doing it, but as I said before, under 9608, I'm trying to look at specific blogs other than the one that you have shown me and the two that I have, the one that I just read, that goes to anything that is impeachable.
What I'd like to do is, based on the court's rulings and the guidance that the court is using to make its decision, I will refrain from addressing this issue with this detective at this time. In the event that I choose to bring it up again, I would certainly make the court aware of it, identify which specific blog I would like to introduce, and the legal basis for my doing so.
Okay.
We could ask that these be provided to us because
Certainly.
so far as we can tell, we've never received these in discovery. So if we could have the entire set in case counsel wants to bring up any of them.
Certainly.
Okay. All right, we'll take a quick 5 minutes and then we'll bring the jury back in to continue your cross-examination.
Yes, sir.
Okay, state recognized presence of jury. Defense.
Yes, sir, we do.
Members of the jury, my apologies. It took me a little longer than 10 minutes. Sometime that happens. Again, my apologies. The witness may resume the stand. You may
Please, the
continue.
court. Detective Melich, you arrived on the scene at 4 a.m.,
Just prior to, I believe, yes.
and that's on Hope Spring Drive.
Yes.
And when you arrive, the first thing you do is meet with Sergeant Hosey.
To the best of my recollection, yes.
And part of that is to be briefed on all that transpired before you got there.
Correct.
And that gives you a better understanding of what needs to be done while you're there.
Yes.
And what was the situation report at that point?
Going based on recollection,
Mr. Baez.
I'm not asking him for specific statements. I'd just like to know what information, what he knew about the case at that point. If I can rephrase it so he doesn't give any specific statements.
Okay, you can attempt to rephrase the question.
Without giving us any hearsay or anything that any information, or without telling us what exactly was said, can you give us a general idea of what you were looking at when you arrived?
well, primarily a missing persons case.
And what else?
I can't recall if there was indication on scene or if it was through a phone call prior about some theft, theft of a car or theft of money, some theft involved.
Now, when you specifically got there, were you made aware that Miss Anthony had already gone to Sawgrass Apartments?
Yes.
Okay, and that was with Acedo, Deputy Acedo, the female officer.
I don't recall who took her at the time. I just recall being told that they had already gone to Sawgrass.
And you were aware that there was nobody home there?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. These answers are based on hearsay that was provided.
Sustain.
Did you have any information about that apartment as to whether suspects were identified?
Same objection.
Sustain.
Did you have any other information about Miss Anthony?
Very vague, I'm sorry.
About Miss Anthony's actions that evening?
Aside from the fact that she had gone with deputies to another location. I can't recall if they had already told me. Obviously, a statement had been filled out. I don't know if they was just handed the statement or if they told me outside.
Were you aware how long the apartment was vacant that she had pointed out?
Any answer would be based on hearsay information.
Sustain.
Did you feel sufficiently informed as to what the situation was when you arrived?
I had a general understanding of why I was there, primarily to look for a missing child.
And when you arrived, did you see the garage door open?
I don't recall what the condition of the garage door.
Did you see the car that evening?
Which car?
The Pontiac Sunfire.
I don't recall what I saw parked where.
Were you made aware of anything going on with that car?
At some point throughout that evening, and I can't recall when, I remember there was a comment made about an odor coming from a car, but I don't recall who made it or at what point throughout my time there that occurred.
So immediately upon getting this information, you went and inspected the car?
No.
You were told that there is a missing child?
Yes.
You are told that the location where Miss Anthony had taken officers showed no results?
Something along those lines, yes.
And then you were told about an odor coming from a car?
Yes.
And you never went and looked at the car?
No.
You never called CSI to come look at the car?
No.
You never secured any possible evidence that may or may not have been at that car?
Upon my arrival that night, when I first responded, no.
You did absolutely nothing with the car?
Correct.
And in your investigation at that point, or that entire evening, you didn't find it necessary to secure that car in any way?
No.
Overrule as to the last question.
You may answer, sir.
No.
Now, one of the first things you looked at with Miss Anthony was she was a suspect, did you not?
At the time I got there, she wasn't a suspect of anything. She was a mother of a missing child.
And despite all of this information that you had, you didn't consider Miss Anthony a suspect?
I hadn't talked to her yet. I didn't know what she was going to tell me. I was just going based on what other deputies had told me upon arrival.
Did you instruct Deputy Hosey to unhandcuff Miss Anthony because you wanted to come down and speak to her?
I did not. I did not even know she was handcuffed.
Did you Mirandize or read Casey Anthony her Miranda warnings prior to questioning her?
No.
And the reason for that is because you didn't think she was a suspect of anything?
She was a mother of a missing 2.5-year-old. That's what I was there to investigate, as a missing 2.5-year-old. I had no reason to Mirandize her.
A mother of a 2.5-year-old who was giving information that did not appear to pan out. Is that correct?
According to what I was told before getting there, yes. But I hadn't talked to her yet, so I don't know if they misunderstood. I don't know what she was going to tell me.
Well, you read her statement, did you not?
Yes.
And, in fact, you testified prior to it getting admitted that you asked her if she was adopting it.
Yes.
Correct? And, in fact, you thought the information that was contained in there was suspect, did you not?
I wrote that in my report, yes.
Okay. But you thought it was suspect.
I can't recall what I thought at the time, but I do acknowledge that I wrote that in my report.
So, since you think she's suspect, you think her stories are going on, but you don't think she's a suspect at all, is what you're saying.
You're saying that I think she's suspect.
Let me rephrase that to make that a little clearer. Her version is suspect, according to you.
To what I wrote in the report, yes.
You have a missing child that's been missing for 30 days.
Yes.
Never reported.
Correct.
The mother's not taking you to a location where you can find the child.
She hasn't taken me anywhere yet.
Or prior officers.
As far as the officers are concerned, correct.
And in your opinion, she's not a suspect.
Yes.
Yes, she is a suspect, or yes, she's not a suspect?
You asked, in my opinion, is she a suspect? No, she's not a suspect.
Now, the statement that she gave, you read it over carefully?
I read it over that night, yes.
Because this is a very important matter.
Yes.
And did you notice that there was a portion in quotations on page 3?
Are you referring to the top 4
Yes.
lines down?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. The portion that reads, quote, that a few places that she felt, quote, at home, end quote.
Yes.
And in this entire 4-page statement, that is the only portion that is in quotations, is it not?
Yes.
And when something is placed in quotations, in your experience, that means it's important, or somebody wants attention drawn to it?
I can't answer to why people put quotes on certain words. Sometimes it's proper, sometimes it's not, so I couldn't answer that.
In your experience, sir, your experience,
Repeat the question.
when people put things in quotations, does that mean they want attention drawn to it?
I can't tell you what they want to. People use quotations all the time. It didn't stand out to me. It doesn't stand out to me now.
Okay. Now, did you ask her why she didn't feel at home in her own home?
No.
And you would later also characterize or document that she went somewhere where she felt safe.
I'm sorry, the question again?
You would later document that she went somewhere where she felt, quote, safe, end quote.
If you're referring to my report?
Yes.
Yes.
In fact, you put that in quotes.
I won't disagree.
And when you put things in quotes, it's because it's important.
I couldn't tell you what my state of mind was when I put it in quotes. Obviously I did, but I can't tell you why I did it now.
So you have no idea why you put that in quotes.
I did. I can't answer now as to why I did.
Did you ask her why she didn't feel safe at home?
I don't believe so, no.
And then you document that the next time you use quotes is when you describe that she had seen movies and reports. You put that in quotes too.
I won't disagree if you're referring to my report, yes.
And you're referring, when you talk about that, is to why she didn't call the police.
Correct.
Did you put that in quotes because you thought that was a pretty outrageous statement to make?
No, based on my recollection, I put it in quotes because it was one of the things that she told me. I don't recall it being on the statement, so it must have been one of the things we mentioned before at the tape or during our drive. So I used it to acknowledge what she said to me.
I'm talking specifically about your frame of reference here, okay? I want to know from you that, in your opinion, when you're eliciting and speaking to her in reference to these statements, that you think they're a little outrageous.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. He's attempting to elicit hearsay statements of his client that were not elicited by the state.
I'll withdraw the question, Judge.
Sustained.
Now, the statements that you first took from her that we heard a while ago, let me give you a copy of that. Do you have one with you?
Not with me, no.
You may.
I'd like to show Detective Defense Exhibit U.
Thank you.
Now, when I'd like to take you down this statement, Detective, And I'll start off on page 2. And line 10. The first area that you start inquiring is you're basically telling her she fabricated a story, are you not?
No.
What is your purpose of saying if you're trying to fabricate a story?
A lot of times before I get an official statement from someone, I'll give them the chance to change whatever they've said previously. I won't hold against them. So a lot of times in an interview, I'll say, listen, I want to make sure that you're telling me the truth. Whatever you may have said in the past, I don't care. What I care about is what you're going to tell me now. So if you're asking me in what context I made that statement, that's the best I can answer that right now.
So what you're telling this jury is that the reason you made that statement is not because you find her story to be a fabrication, but that's something you always say.
I didn't find her story to be a fabrication then because I hadn't had a chance to investigate what she claimed. She was very detailed and specific in her statement, so there was a lot I had to follow up on. I couldn't say that I could tell for sure it was fabricated at that point.
Okay. Let's start off with some of them details then. She tells you that she had known Zenaida Gonzalez for 4 years.
Are you
Correct?
referring to a particular page? You want me to follow along or just in general?
Page 3, line 21.
Yes, almost 4 years.
Okay. And then she tells you that that she was introduced to this person on the next page by a Jeffrey, or actually it's on that page, on line 23, Jeffrey Michael Hopkins.
Yes.
And when you question her about Jeffrey Michael Hopkins, she can't give you any information on how to reach him.
I could only go based on what I asked her, and I believe I asked her where he worked or if she had a contact number for him, and she did not.
So the answer to my question is yes, she didn't give you any information on how to reach him.
Oh, he told me that he used to work at Universal Studios. I would consider that information.
Okay. And then she told you that he went to North Carolina and then moved down to Jacksonville.
Yes.
Then on page 5, she goes into this several statements about SIM cards. Did any of that make sense to you?
Relevancy, Mr. Baez?
I'll rephrase the question, Judge.
Okay.
Did you confront her with any of this information about SIM cards?
I wouldn't say confront. I was trying to get clarification on what she meant since she said she had lost a phone. And when I was asking her for certain numbers, she brought up a SIM card. So I was asking questions for clarification on that.
All right. I'd like to take you to page 11. Lines 16 through 25. The exhibit, I've read it into the record, and it's in evidence. You ask her if she had spoken to anyone else about Kaylee being missing, and she answers Juliette Lewis, correct?
Yes.
She says, she's one of my co-workers at Universal, correct? Yes. Okay. And then you take it a step further and you ask her what she does at Universal, correct?
Yes.
And she tells you an event coordinator, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Then you ask her for a number for Juliette Lewis, correct?
Yes.
And she can't come up with one.
To quote her, she says, I can't think of one.
Okay. Then immediately after that, she tells you that the reason she doesn't have a number is because she just moved up north within the last 2 months to New York.
Yes,
and she's subleasing her apartment.
according to what she said, yes.
Okay. And then at that point, she tells you she doesn't work at Universal anymore.
Correct.
So within 10 seconds, she's telling you she has a coworker at Universal Studios, correct?
Yes.
Who's an event planner, a current employee,
Yes.
and then this person all of a sudden moved up to New York a couple of months ago.
Yes.
But her child's only been missing a month.
Yes.
And she has no number for this person.
Whether she did or didn't, I don't know. She told me she did not.
So you couldn't investigate or couldn't confront anyone about, well, let me strike that and rephrase that. At that point in time, did you do anything to say, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense?
No.
Did you realize that you were dealing with something a little bit unique?
You're asking me to testify to what I felt at the time I was doing the interview. I can't tell you what I felt. I can't say it was unique. I was in an information gathering stage at the time. I was meeting with the mother of a child who's missing. The purpose was to try and get information to locate the child.
You're getting information about one of only 2 outcry witnesses to a crime that occurred a month ago, correct?
It turned out she only gave me 2 outcry witnesses, but there's more to the interview. So at that point, yes, she had given me 2.
And she's telling you in 1 second that the person works with her, and then the next second she's saying she doesn't. All within, what, 10, 15 seconds?
Correct.
And you didn't think at that specific moment that you're dealing with something unique.
Sustain.
You didn't do anything based on that information, did you, sir?
Well, eventually I would go to Universal Studios and try and identify these people. So yes, I did something.
At the end of this interview, you ask her if she's got a drug problem.
Do you have a page and line number, sir?
Yes, page 14, lines 21 through 25.
Yes, I did.
You ask her about cocaine.
Yes.
You ask her about meth,
Yes.
ecstasy,
Yes.
and anything else.
I don't read it off the top of my head, so no, I believe that was it.
And the reason is because,
Sorry, other prescription narcotics as well, just before that.
okay, you're asking her if she's on any prescription medication.
I was asking her if she had any problems with drugs or narcotics, either prescription narcotics, she interrupts, says no, or drugs, cocaine, ecstasy, meth. I asked her if she had problems, not if she was on any.
Okay. Then you ask her if she's ever committed suicide. Next page.
I don't think I could have asked her if she's ever committed suicide, because if she had, she wouldn't be
Thoughts
there.
of committing suicide, excuse me.
Yes.
All right. And then you ask her if she's ever been to Lakeside or anything like that.
Yes.
Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what Lakeside is?
Lakeside is a local receiving facility that we would take people who have mental problems or mental issues, such as under a Baker Act, if somebody's suicidal, have thoughts of hurting themselves, and we would take them into custody, for lack of a better word. We would take them to Lakeside so they can get treatment and be seen by a doctor or a psychiatrist and perhaps get some help.
And the reason you're asking these questions, Detective, is because you realize that the statements being given to you at that particular point in time, at the very beginning of this case, are just not right.
No, I can't tell you the reason I asked that question. Obviously, I did. It's just part of an information gathering process. I ask a lot of questions.
So this is not. So basically, this is just something you do out of routine, and it's not something that you do as a matter of this specific case.
He's answered the question.
Sustain.
You asked those questions because of what you had the information that you had gathered in your investigation at that point? Or is that because, or is that because you do this as a matter of routine?
Wait before you.
Objection asked and answered.
I don't think it has been answered, Judge.
Sustain.
Detective, were you made aware that evening, or did you make any other inquiries about Casey Anthony to other individuals in the home?
I know I had a brief conversation with Cindy. George was there. I don't recall a conversation with him, but I'm not saying I didn't.
And were you made aware of any possible seizures that Casey Anthony may have?
Object. Facts not in evidence, and this is based on a hearsay response.
Sustain based upon hearsay.
Did you get any medical information about Miss Anthony?
Same objection.
As to that particular question, did he get any medical information? He can simply answer yes or no.
Aside from asking other questions about Lakeside, if you would consider that medical information, or prescription drugs, if you would consider that, no.
Do you have a copy of your report, sir?
Not with me, no, sir.
Judge, I have no further questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. Any redirect? May the detective be excused for this time, subject to recall?
Yes, sir.
Detective, you may be excused, subject to recall. Thank you, sir. Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the time is now approximately 4:59 p.m. We're going to recess for the evening. Again, please remember all of my previous admonitions. And have a good evening. I understand one of you has a new name, Johnny Depp. Okay, have a good evening. You may be seated. Okay, folks. On Friday, I will inquire of the state of Florida as to where they think they are and the approximate time when they think they will be wrapping their case up. So the defense can have some basic idea when they would need to start. Turn your microphone on. Is your microphone on?
I can tell you numerically we're about halfway. Obviously, some of the expert testimony might not make it the halfway point time-wise, but as it relates to number of witnesses we intend to call in our case in chief, we're about halfway.
Okay, you're about halfway, so you're talking about another week or 2 weeks.
Perhaps. I think by the end of the week, if things go as planned, we could be up to possibly witness number 49 out of however many we've called. I think we've called 20 plus now.
Yeah.
So maybe we can get another 20. A lot of it is marking evidence that kind of bogs things down a little bit. I'm going to try to have a list for the clerk in the anticipated order to maybe speed that up.
If you would let the clerk know, she can have an extra clerk up here that can be just involved in marking things. Probably we can find another area to mark those things in. And anything else, folks, for the good of the order?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
From the defense.
Okay. Remember, if you need anything that you need to bring up, let the court deputy know by 8:20. He will contact me, and we will take it up before 9 o'clock. With that said, we'll be in recess to 9 a.m. tomorrow morning.